Hey there, I'm Tracy Spears, speaker, author, coach, and founder of Exceptional Leaders Lab, and head cheerleader for anyone wanting to play bigger. This week, you're in for a huge treat as I'm excited to introduce you to somebody that is definitely playing bigger, and I can't wait for you to hear a bit more about her. This week's guest is Janet Levit. Janet Coben Levit concluded a term as interim president at the University of Tulsa in 2021, and thereafter returned to the College of Law in 2022 as a professor. Prior to that, she was the provost and executive vice president for academic affairs. Before being named provost, Levit served as the vice president for strategic initiatives and successfully structured TU's 5-year strategic plan. Levit is the TU's first female provost and previously served as the first female dean of the TU College of Law. Levit's academic interests include reproductive rights, international human rights, and exploring how implicit biases impact women in leadership roles. We're going to talk about that. Her work has garnered her numerous honors, including Tulsa's Women of the Year Pinnacle Award, Anna C. Rock Legacy Award, TU Law Hall of Fame, and the James C. Lang Mentoring Award. Levit serves as vice chair of the Center for Reproductive Rights Board of Directors. She also serves on the Tulsa Women's Commission and the Human Rights Commission and on the Take Control Initiative Advisory Board. Levit is currently serving as an executive consultant to Repro 46, a not-for-profit educational project that strives to inform Oklahomans from all political perspectives of the impact and consequences of Oklahoma's overreaching laws that negatively affect health, safety, and well-being of women and girls. She received her JD and MA from Yale University and her AB from Princeton University. I'm thrilled to introduce you to my friend, Janet Levit. Janet, so glad to have you on the show.
It's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Tracy.
You're so welcome. I read that bio. As you listen to that bio, you have done a lot of things, my friend. How does that sound when you hear it back?
You know, it sounds like I'm too old. It's like I don't know where all the time went. It sounds like each step of the way just felt like the next step. It just felt very natural. But I feel like my mother, grandmother, or maybe not exactly their trajectories, but I feel like some of my mentors, and I just don't know where all the time went.
I understand. Listen, I want to talk about all of those mentors, and we'll talk about the time. And we've heard the official bio, but let's talk a little bit about you. Tell us where you grew up, and maybe what was the first time you remember a shift that, changed you in some way.
So I grew up north of Chicago, in the Chicago suburbs. If anyone listening has seen the movie Risky Business, that was sort of where I grew up. It was an idyllic place to grow up, and my parents, who are so critical for everything that I am and everything that I've been able to build and achieve, they really sacrificed everything to buy into such a great public school district. I mean, that was the priority for them. They wanted their girls to be as well educated as possible. So I think the first shift is maybe the shift to a pretty accelerated ambition, to sort of thinking of the world of possibilities as really much more open and wide than I think a lot of girls, teenage girls, when I was growing up, maybe thought of the world. And certainly what our parents and grandparents, and particularly mothers and grandmothers, were able to think of the world. So I just remember at a very early age, and I don't know why, but sort of locking in on the fact that I wanted to go to Princeton. I'm not sure why, but just locking in and sort of really doing whatever I could during high school to make that dream a reality.
Wow. I had nothing like that in my thoughts. I love that for you when you talk about growing up in a household where the sky's the limit as you described it. That's what I was thinking. Like, I can't even imagine that was not my experience. But did you feel like we could do anything that you wanted to do? Is that what is the outcome of an upbringing like that?
Well, and let me make it clear.
Yeah.
I grew up in what I consider a really privileged upbringing because my parents were so much just always told me that I could do whatever I wanted, and they would try to support me in any way possible. But I did not grow up in sort of the privileged, at least for the suburbs of Chicago, the privileged background financially. Both of my parents were public servants. My mother was a teacher. My dad was a lawyer for the federal government. I mean, they believed strongly in public service and just aligned their values to be able to support me and my sister in building our dreams. So I that was how I grew up, and that was also just the choices that my parents made. Our sort of physical existence was very modest, particularly for the area that I grew up in. Yeah.
Interesting. So now that makes sense because you definitely have a public servant's heart. I do know that about you. So I love hearing that. I didn't ask you, Cubs or White Sox?
Absolutely Cubs. I
Okay,
mean,
good.
absolutely. And in 1984, I won the citywide lottery for Cubs tickets. Unfortunately, the Padres didn't allow that to happen, but it was a really, really big deal in Chicago in 1984. And I still have a photocopy of the tickets that we did have to return in order to get our money back.
I have behind me, I'm going to, so this is terrible for an audio podcast, but I'm going to show you. Do you see the Cubs diehard Cub fan club certificate? Do you see it?
Oh, that's great. Tracy, I had no idea. We're like kindred spirits, all about the north side, Wrigley Field, the Cubs.
That's right. Well, so as a kid in a trailer park, I got to see them on. Were you either a Cubs fan or you were a Braves fan? Because that was what you could get on TV. But I remember the first time I went, and I remember walking in. And if people, I think that somebody we've talked about this before, but I'm just going to tell you this because it's your first time to hear it. I just started crying when I walked into Wrigley Field. I couldn't believe how emotional it was, the energy of the field. And, when you watch it all the time, and, Andre Dawson was playing, Ryan Sandberg was my favorite. Yeah. Ron Say was there at the time. Fergie Jenkins was pitching. And I have goosebumps right now. I just remember that feeling of being in Wrigley Field. Did you go to a lot of the games?
I mean, I went to some. In fact, sort of small fact, my dad, who spent lots and lots of time as a kid in Wrigley Field, actually broke his nose not once but twice there because of balls that hit his nose.
What?
And so that's just a great fun fact. And like I, as a little girl, would name my stuffed animals after Cubs players, famous Cubs players. So yes, I went to some games. But awesome. Yeah, that stadium, it is emotional because it's just beautiful, and it represents something about life and urban life in America that I think we've lost in a lot of the big corporate fancy venues.
I agree with you. I remember the scoreboard. There was still a guy, you could see his face, and people putting up.
Yeah.
There's something nostalgic that I think baseball and that connection to that. So anyway, let's talk more about you. But I just needed to know that you're a Cubs fan, so that makes me feel better. So you are hell bent on it's going to be Princeton. And what did you want to do when you entered? Did you know what you were going to major in? Did you know all the things, or did you just want to go to Princeton?
Well, first, I just really wanted to go to Princeton. And again, I don't know why. I think there were a couple students who were ahead of me in high school that I really admired. Parenthetically, one of them is the professor of my son in law school. So just sort of life comes around full circle. And I also wanted to see the world a little bit more, get to the coast, get closer to sort of the New York City, which is one of the big benefits of Princeton. There's a little train. It's called the Dinky that just goes right from campus essentially to New York City. So that's fabulous. And once I got there, I thought I wanted to be a diplomat. I was all about international relations. I did Model UN. Some of your listeners might know what that is. I was sort of Miss Model UN, and continued that even into college. And I wanted to be a diplomat until I actually had the opportunity to see what being a diplomat was firsthand, on a summer internship. And so that I was in Brazil. I spent the summer in Brasilia. I studied Portuguese when I was in college. And I was sent to the embassy in Brasilia. And while it was a fabulous experience, I think I learned there that I didn't necessarily want to be a diplomat.
Wow, what happened?
Well, there were sort of two pieces. One, the kids of a lot of these lifelong diplomats live just sort of a very weird wanderer life. And while I was friends with them because I was sort of thrown in and their contemporary, it was not necessarily the life that I imagined for some hypothetical kids down the line. And second, and maybe this was just unique for Brasilia, which is this very strange city in the middle of the country. The embassy was sort of like a country club compound, tennis court, swimming pool, the whole deal. But those who worked there seemed very insular, insulated, and not necessarily interacting with Brazilians and with the culture. And it seemed just sort of that you were transplanting this very Americanized group of people, and sort of just it was like a little United States in Brazil. And it was somewhat disenchanting because I had studied Latin America. I did Latin American studies. I spent time with my Portuguese professors eating Brazilian food and reading Brazilian literature and watching Brazilian movies, and none of this really happened there. So to me, I just knew that if I was going to pursue a career, an international career, I wanted one that was a little bit more integrated with the country and with the culture.
Interesting. So you come back from that experience going, nope, not going to be a diplomat. Like, was it pretty much that?
Yeah, it was pretty much that clear cut.
So
And
what happened?
so this was 1989, 1990. And gosh, I'm embarrassed. I'm sort of embarrassed to even say this, but like LA law was the craze, was the fad. You're laughing because you probably remember it. And every Thursday evening, I would get together with my friends in the equivalent of our sort of fraternity sorority house. And we would, this was just a ritual. And so it was just sort of like, of course, this is what smart, accomplished people do. They go to law school. And if you actually look at the, if you look at the history of law school applications, they were at just sort of an all-time high during that period. And a lot of people really attribute that to this LA law phenomenon. Now, my father was a lawyer. My grandmother was a lawyer. But I actually think it was more just sort of like, this is what everyone's doing. And so I applied to law school.
Interesting. Grandmother was a lawyer? What?
My grandmother received her law degree from Northwestern in 1937. Isn't that unbelievable?
That gives me chills. I love that.
And now she never really practiced law. And if you look at the histories of people like Justice O'Connor or Justice Ginsburg, very much women did not have the opportunities. But as the story has been told to me, her father really wanted her to go to law school. And it was during the Depression period, and those with means, which she had, were able to do things like that. And actually, I think in thinking about higher ed, that was probably a period where women gained more access to many of our really wonderful institutions. So yes, she was, she was a lawyer.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so you decide because of LA law, tongue in cheek.
Not really.
I know, tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
Tongue in cheek. That, so that's did you know what branch you wanted to go, like what was going to be, or did you just kind of like from the beginning say you were going to explore all of the options?
So I very much consistent with sort of entering college, wanting to be a diplomat, studying Spanish, studying Portuguese, immersing myself in Latin American studies, really wanted to do international law, not really understanding what international law is. But there are several different pieces of it. But for me, I wanted to go in to law to do international work, to be jet setting around the world, and to be working on complex international transactions, and then also to have a foot in the international human rights piece of international law. So when I went to law school, and I was really, really fortunate to have gone to Yale Law School, which is sort of like the candy shop Disneyland of law schools, no grades, like amazing resources at your disposal, just tremendous professors and tremendous classmates who right now are doing amazing things. Met my husband there, which is sort of a piece of the story. But I also did a master's degree at the same time in international relations, again, just wanting to get more grounding in international economics, international finance. And I wasn't quite ready to just sort of not study international, the history, diplomacy, etc.
Gotcha. So do you know Karen Kiley, by the way?
Karen Kiley or Kylie?
Kiley, Karen Kiley.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do.
So she was on my podcast last season, and I bet you all have a lot to talk about. That's all I'm going to say. So for the listeners, if you remember her, because now I want to go to dinner with both of you. So at the same time, so in that kind of space that you're in, and internet, and by the way, Portuguese and Spanish, was there some connection there that?
Not really. I studied Spanish in high school, and I have and then picking up Portuguese after learning Spanish is actually not that difficult, because there are not very many irregular verbs in Portuguese, and there's a lot of regular verbs in Spanish. So it really was just in order to be a Latin American studies major at Princeton, you had to have proficiency in Spanish and also in a secondary language that was used in the region. So that would be either Portuguese or French.
Thank you. Do you wish you would have done French? Is there any part of you?
No. Well, only for when I go to Paris,
right?
Which is one of my favorite cities in the world. But Portuguese is just a beautiful, beautiful language, and the music and the literature. I'm really glad that at this point, I wouldn't even consider myself proficient in it, but maybe, maybe I always dream about, going back and studying it again. So I've become better.
You probably speak French. I assumed you don't.
No, I do not. Do you?
I barely speak the English language very well. So that's the. Okay, so you're there. So tell me a couple of other shifts during that period for you that.
So one shift, and I think this is important for a lot of women to hear, is one shift is like I met my life partner, and that partnership involved a geographic move that was pretty inconsistent with what I thought my life plan was going to be, which was sort of, living all around the world and basing myself probably in Washington, D.C., and sort of in and out of policy and private sector legal work and representing countries and sovereign growth funds and et cetera. And then I meet this guy from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who has really strong, deep roots in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So what I tell my students a lot, and what I also tell my kids is, just I was not prepared for sort of. I just thought this trajectory just keeps on going, and then at some point in life, you are building a trajectory that in tandem often with someone else. And so what may, I wouldn't even call them compromises, but just like life happens and you sort of end up walking through doors that are sort of not all that expected. And I think one of my mantras has been like, really walk through those doors, embrace those doors, and sort of, make your opportunities. And so we moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh my gosh. And what did you think when you got here?
Well, we didn't even have a Starbucks. I mean, we had to go to the Barnes and Noble at those who are Tulsans who are listening at 71st and Memorial to even get Starbucks. But no, really, I was so fortunate that my path here involved a judicial clerkship for a really tremendous Judge Stephanie Seymour, who is one of my life mentors, and I would have followed her anywhere. It just so happened that she was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which worked out really, really well. But she was, I think it's only the second woman appointed to the circuit courts, which are the federal circuit, which is just one step below the Supreme Court. She was the first woman chief of any circuit. And just, I just learned so much from her professionally and personally. She remains, one of my dearest friends, which has been one of the huge benefits of staying in the city that I clerked in. So I would say, Starbucks notwithstanding, I had a professional experience in Tulsa that would have been really difficult to replicate anywhere else in the country.
I'm thinking about just that idea of that shift to, and you said, now you're in life in making decisions as a tandem. And I mean, was that an easy transition for you as a couple? Was that, was there any part of in that decision that he would not come back, that you would not come back to Tulsa? Were there other options that you all looked at?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I would say it was not easy. It became easier after, I would say, my professional trajectory and options grew, but it was not easy. And yes, we did look. We both had options at traditional law firms in Washington, D.C., some of the biggest, best law firms there. We had clerked there during our summers in law school. And I will tell you, and we still have this to this day, we had a yellow piece of lined paper that we did a pro-con sheet, and hand wrote like stay go. And there was just some more compelling items in the stay column, particularly around community and impact. But I also have, and I still have this, a written contract that gave me the right to exercise in 1 year the right to leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
Between the two of you, you handwritten.
Yeah, I have a handwritten contract. Again, never exercised that, but
I love that. Is that on the same legal paper that you literally just?
No, it's not legal paper, but we've recently moved, and I was going through papers, and we still have that. We still have it, and it's still a reminder.
Sure. You choose each other. Yeah, you're choosing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I hope that I see that hanging up in your house one day. I think that would be hilarious.
Yeah, I should frame it.
I love it. Well, I want to talk about your house in a little bit, but we'll come back to this. So you end up in Tulsa. Has there ever been a time when you all thought about leaving
Well, we did
after?
leave. We did leave for a couple of years. And it was Ken, my husband, had an appointment in the Clinton administration, a sort of an opportunity that he couldn't pass up at the CIA.
I want
And
that.
so we moved, and that was a time where I actually did practice. I practiced at the Export-Import Bank of the United States and doing the kind of international work that I had sort of hoped and anticipated to do. But I will tell you, Tracy, we affirmatively chose to move back after about 2 years. Again, because while DC is a wonderful city and I worked with tremendous people and learned a lot, um, it's pretty sterile and doesn't have a sense of community. And we spent a lot of holidays by ourselves. That would never happen in Tulsa, particularly never in the Tulsa Jewish community, where you would always have lots of invitations for holidays, and I think we just felt the community is super important. It's
Yeah.
a super important part of life, and so like that really that interlude really made that yellow piece of paper and that contract moot for me.
Mhm.
I mean, I wanted to come back.
I love that. I love knowing that. And when I think about just the idea of you did get to go do the thing that you went to school to do. So you were making that decision with that as an experience, not as a, you know, maybe I want to do it or don't. So I
Yeah.
love that you had that. And I want to say this for the listeners, I mean, you all, when I think of the Tulsa community, I think of you and Ken. Like, I mean, you all are a very big part of the Tulsa community and entrenched in the community. I can't imagine our community without you all here. So just a thank you for all that you both do.
Well,
As
thank you. Sometimes I sort of touch myself and say, "Oh my gosh, I am a Tulsan. I've lived here longer than anywhere else." Never in the life plan, but you know what? I really love it and I'm really proud of it. And it's a significant part of my identity and a significant part of my kids' identity. My kids both attribute growing up with Tulsa to a lot of what they have themselves have been able to accomplish.
I saw that Becca graduated from college. Oh,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
can I say her name?
She's en route back to New York City right now from a quick trip to Europe with friends, and she's going to be living in New York City. So so that's really, really exciting.
Well, so you have two wicked smart children. No surprise here. And I don't know if you want to talk about any of them, other shifts, but I'll just kind of open this up to you at this point. So you get back here, you all are entrenched in the community. Not that this has to be chronological, but what are some of the other shifts when you think back and you go, man, that happened and my life was never the same, or it took a different turn? What were some of the other things that came to mind when you knew we were going to talk about this today?
So I mean, maybe I'll stay chronological and I'll let you.
Okay.
So let's just go back to this clerkship that I had, and sort of the question then was what to do next, and still having a desire to keep a foot in sort of the international law, international human rights realm. There were not a lot of opportunities in private practice in Tulsa at the time. I think there may actually be a lot more now, but at the time there weren't. So I became a baby faculty member at the University of Tulsa College of Law, where I was barely older than many of my students. And when I look back on that, it just feels sort of crazy, but it was also wonderful and fun. And that allowed me to keep on doing scholarship, thinking, writing, speaking about international law and international human rights. But also just I love working with students. And so that was really a shift, I think I probably always had an academic side in me. I think I probably exercised that lever earlier than I might have done if I lived other places. Um, but that was a definite shift that was very rewarding, and that clearly shaped a huge part of my career trajectory. So that was one. Um, the second shift was in that context of being at the University of Tulsa, being an academic, in that I was asked somewhat unexpectedly in 2007 to step into an interim role as dean of the law school. I was 39 at the time, and I was also on this glorious year that academics sometimes get called a sabbatical, and really was like re-examining what I was going to do with the next phase of my career. And so like that was one of the doors that was unexpected that I walked through. And it was complicated. It was at a complicated moment in the history of the College of Law. It was hard, made some hard decisions, took some punches, had some bruises. But also like really took the shift from a pretty monastic existence of being a sort of sole proprietor professor, to all of a sudden being a leader, being embedded within leadership within a broader institution, and like all of a sudden just really recognizing that leadership was something that I really enjoyed, management was something that I enjoyed, and that I was on a huge, huge learning curve.
There's a lot to learn when you get to
Yeah.
when you make that shift, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that, when you decide to say yes, you're now at that point the dean, and you started to really enjoy that. Was there something else that you during the sabbatical that you were considering at that time, or did that door open at a time when it just was like, yeah, no, I'm going through this door?
I was considering maybe leaving academia altogether, in the sense that I think I had hit a point where I was a little bored or a little antsy, like to just do a little bit more. And so I it was very much at the beginning of that period. And so it just came at it came at a really great time. Um, and it presented for me what has presented itself at multiple times in my career, which is sort of a pretty pressing challenge, a complex problem that needed to be sorted out, strategized, and solved. And at the time, that problem for the law school um, was really a performance issue of sort of how our students were performing on the bar exam and otherwise, and a reputation issue for the university of how the law school was seen among its peers. So that was really what I would identify as the first of one of several pretty complex issues and problems that were thrown my way. And what I learned is I sort of relished that mode of like problem solver. Um, yeah, I relished that.
I think I got to think about how I would say this. I think you might be one of the most, if not the most strategic person I've ever met. You are very good at all of the different things in play, keeping all of those in mind. Do you feel like that? Do you feel that way, that you're really, really good at that? Like that idea to kind of see how things connect?
Yes, and part of that is because of my own, I would say, insecurity, in that like some people are big picture vision people and some people are really in the weeds. And I think I have to understand the weeds in order to get to the big picture. So I sort of consider myself both, and I'm able to navigate back and forth there. And that's just because I always want to know and understand the details. I mean, the trees in order to understand the forest. Um, and so I think that lends itself to strategic thinking. Um, Also just the training as a lawyer, is very much a problem solving, strategizing. I mean, it very much emphasizes problem solving and strategizing and sort of looking around the next corner. It's not just about the case or issue in front of you. It's how, like, the resolution of this case might impact issues in the future, either for your client or for whoever you're working for. So I have found that, like, working with colleagues in other disciplines, that lawyers are just very much more geared towards problem solving, not just identifying problems, but solving them.
And being willing to do the work to get up to speed to then make the decision. It's never like, I experienced that with you, like the amount of material that you read through and went through and to get to whatever decision you were going to make, or I was just really impressed by that. And, I know what I know about you is you're not going to come to any decision or any conversation without being incredibly prepared, even more prepared than anyone else. Like that felt like your superpower, is that you were not going to be outworked. You were not going to be the person that didn't know the thing that was on page 8. And, like that's, I really, I don't know. I was just really impressed by that in
Well, I
watching
mean,
you.
yeah, I mean, thank you, Tracy, for that. And part of it is when you are in leadership roles, you have to accept, I mean, you are ultimately accountable, and the buck stops
That's
with
right.
you. And I never believed in pointing fingers at anyone else. And so it was my responsibility to understand. And also I felt, particularly when you're leading teams, and particularly leading teams through stressful periods, I wanted to roll up my sleeves too, and get dirty and make sure that those who I was working with didn't feel that, like, they were doing the heavy lifting, and I, by virtue of being a mouthpiece, was taking credit for it. That really, it was a true team effort.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would ever accuse you of not getting dirty. Well, yeah, or not being, in the ring for sure. I love that about you, truly. Uh, do you think that it's harder for women in leadership roles?
Yes.
Tell me more.
Well, I mean, I think women are supposed to act a certain way, and I think also women who um are strong, who have opinions, um uh who might ultimately make decisions that are top down decisions, who have to make hard calls. Like, it is so much easier to, I mean, those women are pigeonholed as often cold, not warm and fuzzy, maternal. Um,
Yeah.
and I just think the baseline expectations are different. I'm not gonna, I mean, there were a lot of comments which are seared in my brain. I'm not gonna call them out now because I don't want to call out any of the people, but just that really just showed a great deal of bias and inconsistency in how leaders, which were my predecessors and oftentimes my successors, were sort of treated, or the kind of flack that those, again, predecessors or successors were given.
Yeah, I don't think anybody disagrees with that. This idea especially no, there are not anybody listening that's a female in a leadership role that doesn't feel the same way or see that. And I do think you're right. There's a generalized bias about this is how women act, this is how men act, people that identify as male and female. There's a bigger conversation there to be had, obviously. For you, as you think about all of that, do you want to get back in the arena in that way, in some way?
Well, so yes and no. I mean, I guess I'll talk about the shift, my most recent shift, which is not completely chronological, but as you know, like following the deanship, and as you said in the bio, I took on some other positions at the university at what might be considered a higher level, that ended with the, very much you were a supporter of mine during that time as in the interim president role, at a very difficult time in the university's history and in our country's history. It was during COVID. So all of that. And as I transitioned from that position, I really reflected on my leadership trajectory, what had helped me climb a pretty steep trajectory, and what were some barriers to at the moment in real time continuing on that trajectory, and really thinking about women in leadership. And it was at that moment in very, very early 2021 that I decided that one of those issues was women's reproductive autonomy and the ability to really control the decisions and the timing of like when and if you were going to have children. Now this was in 2020, so before the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. But so at that moment, I joined the Center for Reproductive Rights board. The Center for Reproductive Rights is an organization based in New York. It has offices all around the world. It believes that reproductive rights are truly human rights, and they have been the litigators of really some of the largest cases. Most recently, the Dobbs case, which unfortunately they did not win. But so that was a way to transition both back to the law and also to sort of sink into what I felt was the necessary predicate for women to really achieve the kind of professional trajectories that I think they should and need to achieve. And then fast forward, Roe versus Wade was overturned. Women lost a right that they had for 50 years. Arguably, that sort of loss of a right like that is unprecedented in the civil rights history of this country. We may see more of it down the line, unfortunately. And so I started to really dig in through my teaching, through my scholarship, and also through my work in the community to trying to see what could be done to mitigate and then reverse the impact of the regression in reproductive rights in states like Oklahoma, which is absolutely, along with Texas, probably the worst state for women in the reproductive rights realm.
Which is heartbreaking. And I remember, I think maybe you were walking, I was walking. I just remember it being a casual exchange, and you were talking about how you were afraid it was going to be overturned. And I remember the look in your eye, and like I was not paying attention. I'm just going to say, I guess a lot of us weren't. I think I just had this idea, there's no chance that it could happen. Like I just wasn't paying attention. And in the way that after I saw the look in your eye, that I started paying attention. I was like, she knows something. Like, and it was just that you were reading the tea leaves, obviously, and you were rightly so, right at the time that you decided to be active in that organization. Was it because of that, or was it because you already had a passion for that? Like, did you do that because you were afraid?
No, I mean, I would say really no. I think I became quickly afraid once I sunk into it.
Okay.
But, like, let's face it, people in Oklahoma or in most places, like, did not talk about abortion, like, did not utter that word. And as president of the university or provost, like, that was not, I mean, having to represent the whole organization, that was not something that I spoke about. And and in stepping back and in sort of stepping out of leadership from the university and having the autonomy to sort of do things and think things for myself and not necessarily institutionally, um, again, I just felt that this is the predicate, this is the baseline, um, for women to be able to advance professionally and break through really the stasis of where women have been as far as representation on boards and in the judiciary and leadership positions. And so I wouldn't say that I was prescient, but when you started sinking into the issue, you realized with with the appointments that President Trump made to the Supreme Court, the writing was on the wall. And so I would say my biggest shift recently has been back to being a really strong advocate. And to being an advocate about something I deeply, deeply care about and believe in. So I would characterize a lot of my career and trajectory as sort of doing those things that I thought sort of smart, accomplished, highly credentialed people should do. I would say now I have shifted to this position of doing what I feel deeply internally passionate about doing. And maybe that is the benefit of age and hindsight and maybe sort of having checked some of those boxes previously. But like that has been a critically important shift in my life.
And that's where your joy is, I would imagine too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
when I'm doing this work, it doesn't feel like work.
Gosh, so the Repro 46, let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that if you don't mind.
So Repro 46 is a nonprofit organization that I'm been very involved recently in launching. And its mission is really to focus on educating Oklahomans, Republicans, Democrats, men, women, of really the dangers of the laws we have in Oklahoma surrounding reproductive health. The dangers not just for those who want to seek abortion care, but for anyone who needs to seek health care. I mean, we're losing OBGYNs. Medical students are not wanting to come to Oklahoma to do residencies. We have healthcare deserts in like 60%, 67% of the counties in Oklahoma. If you're in rural Oklahoma, you have to drive miles and miles and miles to get to someplace to just deliver a baby. And we know through stories that have come out that doctors are scared to deliver medical care in emergency situations to women who are in grave danger. And like this is a problem. This is a problem for all Oklahomans, and Repro 46 wants to shine a light on that problem. And it really wants to speak to we're so divided as a country, we're so polarized, but really want to speak to those who we think can move from a place of judgment to empathy on an issue that again, years ago was taboo, but I think post Dobbs, what we're seeing is how sort of normalized abortion care is, how it is really a part of healthcare, how 1 in 4, 1 in 3 women have had an abortion in the course of their lives, and many need one medically in order to preserve their fertility, in order to have more children, or in order to just live.
Alive.
So Repro 46, we are working to really educate those on what the issue is and what it means for all Oklahomans.
What is the like when you think about educating everyone? Like, first of all, how can people get involved in that? I want to make sure before we fit or quit that people can find you in that. But what is your hope? Like, what happens? That's getting launched now. What's the outcome? Not only are we educating everyone, and that hopefully informs policy. That hopefully,
Yes.
okay.
So I mean, the long-term goal, and this would probably be a goal that would be met through a very broad coalition of many different groups. So I just want to underscore there are so many really
Right.
impressive, powerful people working in this space. Our lane is very much on what I would call the movable middle, sort of moderates, independent types. The long-term goal would be changing policy in the state of Oklahoma, just like policy has been changed in Ohio and in Michigan, in Missouri. There's now efforts to change policy, and that would probably be done at some point in the future through a ballot initiative. It's really premature to start talking about that. We just need Oklahomans to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And so how to find us? Repro46.org. We're very new. We're a spinoff from an organization called We Are Rising. Some wonderful women who started this in 2022 in Oklahoma City, doing more classic political work, and we're sort of the education arm of that. And we our presence, we really hope our presence will be felt much more profoundly as we build out both a communications program, and also we really just want to get people together, talking about just very intimate settings, talking about their experiences, talking about their families, talking about their fears and hopes, and how these laws may interfere with that.
Listen, I can't imagine more important work for you, like for us to be doing. I don't want to overstate this, but like, I mean, I am so fearful, and I don't want to be. I know that you don't need to be afraid. You need to be advocating and doing the thing. I admire that you're doing that. I love that you're taking this passion and actually doing something about it, and hoping to change the world. Do you have any political aspirations at all?
No.
I thought you were going to make a big announcement.
No. I mean, well, I so admire people like Suzanne Schreiber or Laura Bellis, who've thrown their hat in the ring at either sort of a local or state level. Both of them, I mean, I admire them, and I look up to them and what they're doing. I think my work will be much more powerful in this advocacy space, because it also allows me to use a lot of my strategic skills to sort of say, like, how can we talk about this in a way, just to repeat again, that moves people, not changes minds necessarily, but just moves people to a place of empathy, to understanding that we can differ and have different worldviews, have different religious views, but we really shouldn't be in judgment of each other. And I think that that's just where I need to be right now.
Gosh, I think that's where we all need to be.
Maybe.
Right? I think
maybe.
so.
I think in this time, maybe.
I want to just let this pause for a moment, so we all, I mean, I think, we could all benefit from that. What's the next shift for you, or what are some of the other shifts in our time left that you want us to get to?
Gosh, I mean, that's a big question. I would say, in thinking about, obviously, when you invite me to a show that's called Shift, I've thought about shifts, and I've thought about them a little bit more meta than chronological. But I think for me, again, as a lawyer, as someone who's just like constantly in strategy and thinking logically, it's recognizing that logic and rational thinking does not often motivate people. And sort of how to lead and build strategies around sort of this empathy piece. So that's one shift. And along with that, and you just said it, you just sort of alluded to this before, I think because of that sort of rational, logical thinking, believe that people are motivated sometimes out of fear, out of trying to avoid like worst case things from happening, but that actually that may be demotivating. And that being able to paint sort of a positive picture of a future of possibility, is just as motivating, if not more motivating. And that is just a mindset shift for me as I think about, whether encouraging my students to sink in and actually do the work, sort of how to paint that picture, or just thinking about like how to talk about hot button questions and issues in a way that can impact change.
That's such a skill set. And the leaders that can create a vision that people want to be part of allows them to let go of the fear, because you're in this space, as you just described, that you're, running away from something or to something. And most people are running away from something, and they want to run to something, but not a lot of great leaders have the ability to say, this is where you're running to. I can think of some political, candidates and, that did this very well. But I'm struck by how right now there is a lot of success with some political candidates being more about the fear than about the place that we're all trying to get to. And it's, as somebody that studies leadership, it's just confounding to me that that's happening, and that, as you said, really smart, intelligent. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with, I think, what you're going towards. And I just don't know that a lot of people are doing a good job talking about that, what we're going towards. And I'm trying to be a little bit cryptic without intentionally trying to be that, but, Barack Obama, I thought, was so great at that. I thought Bill Clinton was brilliant at that, like create, hope, like all of the places we were going to. And I don't feel like we have that right now. I feel like it's more about what we're afraid of than it is what we are trying to get to. Does that, am
I agree. I mean, I agree. And I guess what we just all have to pledge to do is, in our micro spaces, try to combat that.
Yeah.
And, so I guess maybe just thinking of the last major shift, I started my life thinking that the world was the stage that I was going to play on, and that's where the most impact can be made. I ended thinking that it's really local, sometimes just highly localized, and being able to interact with people on a very intimate, interpersonal level, is where maybe change is going to need to happen in the next period in our history, because we're just at an incredibly fractured time. I don't remember a time in my lifetime. I think my parents would say that the 60s and the civil rights period would felt equally as fractured, but it's, I think we're at a deeply, deeply fractured, scary, potentially dangerous moment, and that I just believe the solution is local in the Tulsa, Oklahomas of this world.
Man, I think that's beautifully said. No disagreement coming from me on that. And the idea of shifting to empathy strategically, I love that. And I think it's definitely the what people need to be going towards. So I always think differently after I interact with you. That's what I love about you. And I'm going to think about this conversation. Is there anything else, any other shift that we could learn from you in our last little bit of time together?
No, this has just been such a pleasure. What I love about you, Tracy, is your ability to ask these questions to really prompt and provoke great conversation, but also deep thinking. That's your superpower.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope that we get together. I haven't seen you in like 3 years or something. It's been silly. So I was like, well, jump on this podcast, but let's agree to share some of that intimate space soon, my friend.
Okay.
All right. And
this is really fun. Yeah. So yes, reach out. Let's get something on the books.
I will. But how can people, let's say somebody's listening right now and they're like, I want to be part of that intimate conversation. How do they find you?
So yes, they would find me at repro46.org, and we are going to be launching in the fall a series of what we're calling, for lack of a better term right now, but I would be very open to a better term, but a series of kitchen conversations where we just want to bring 5, 6, 7 people together in people's homes, and walk them through like a series of questions and maybe conversation prompters, and maybe having some facts that can debunk some of the fiction out there, maybe having some experts via video share some thoughts, and really get people outside of our echo chambers talking to each other about, for me, reproductive healthcare and sort of the health of our state and ultimately of our country.
All right. Well, listen, my friend, I love seeing you. Thank you for all you're doing to make our city, our state, and our country better. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.